Man in the booth. Walter Cronkite, hello. Well, we're thankful that you could join us tonight. We are in the book of Exodus, and we're going to talk about some things affiliated with that. So that'll be Exodus chapter 20. We'll have a word of prayer, and we'll get into it. Okay. Would you pray with me, please? Father God, we're grateful tonight for the chance to come together, and we rejoice in so many things going on in our building this evening. And I pray that the children, the gals, that they also might receive a blessing from your hand, and that your Holy Spirit, who is among us this evening, would be asked to come into our hearts and our minds, even as we look at your word, that he would bring out for us as individuals things that really apply to us, that speak to our heart and our need. And we want to revel in your presence, be glorified by being with you, and that we might glorify your name in Jesus' name. Amen. So the first thing I want us to look at, because we left off with this last week, is this fourth commandment of the 10, verse number 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I gave you a printout, and I just want to briefly, you can read this on your own time, but I just want to briefly go through this, that in the scriptures, in the New Testament, there is no mention that the disciples, that Christians, we know that the Jewish Christians in the beginning still held on to that practice of praying. They'd go to the temple on the Sabbath to pray because that was just a part of their tradition. But in terms of worship, the New Testament is very clear that the church met on the first day of the week. They stopped. They didn't meet on Saturday. They didn't keep the Sabbath. And then the second part of that, testimony of patristic writers, and all that means are those men that lived in that first century, AD 120 and on. They talk about the fact, they witness that Christians only met on Sunday, first day of the week. They didn't meet on Saturday at all. And you've got quotes from the Didache, Epistle of Barnabas, Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Eusebius, and they just had that. Now, in case you're wondering, what God said about Old Testament is it was only required of the Jews. Some people want to say, well, they were observing the Sabbath from the time of creation. I mean, as soon as Adam and Eve had kids, they started saying, Cain, Abel, get dressed. We're going to go keep the Sabbath today. No, they didn't. And just think this through. If all of the peoples in the world were observing the Sabbath, number one, why would it be unique for the Jews? Number two, why would they have to be reminded to keep it if they had been keeping it for thousands and thousands of years? But they have all the scriptures. I've got those in it. And I like especially this one on page 5/9, Exodus 35:3. God says, Moses, tell the people, you're not going to light a fire in any of your homes on the Sabbath day. Now, for Israel, and some of us have been there, the longitude, latitude of that area is like Georgia, Louisiana. So you've got Atlanta, New Orleans. Once in a great while it gets cold, chilly, but on average the temperature is about 65 is the lowest it gets. That is quite a bit different than, say, Jews that are in Alaska or Siberia. They wouldn't want to go one day not lighting a fire. I mean, that would be a real sacrifice. And God takes that into consideration when he makes these rules for his people. They were in a climate that would allow them not to make a fire and still be comfortable. So the Sabbath was terminated when Jesus went to the cross. Paul said that the law of the commandments was abolished through the cross. He says that in Ephesians chapter 2. And the New Testament, the only one of the 10 commandments that's not in the New Testament in one way or another is keeping the Sabbath. That's the only one that's not repeated. All the others are there in a roundabout way. But keeping the Sabbath isn't in there at all. Did you get one of those handouts? Good boy. Nice. Thank you. Okay, any questions I can't answer? Thank you. All right. So, let's move on to verse 12. Norm, you ready? Exodus 20, verse 12. Here we make a change. The first 4 of the 10 commandments is the Israelites dealing in relationship with God. The last 6 is Israel's dealing in relationship with mankind. And love for God comes first, because we can't really love one another if we're not loving God. And it makes perfect sense to us. It doesn't to the world. They keep singing and crying out and yawking about we need to love one another, and they don't even love God. So, why do you suppose, of these last 6 commandments, why do you suppose the first one of those 6 deals with our relationship with our parents? Why does that one, if he's gone through the first 4, now he's going to change gears and talk about our relationship with one another. Why do you suppose our relationship with our parents is first? Yes, Charlie.
How can you honor something that's unseen when he's not perceived as seen?
That's good. Yeah, I like that. You always come up with these. Good, yeah. What else could it be the reason he's going to start with parents?
Because you're the closest to them all of your life.
Yes. That's right. Turn over to Ephesians chapter 6. And Tim, would you read the first 3 verses?
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth.
Yeah. Do you see that promise there in Exodus? Now, there was a generation at the turn of the century, I'm talking the 1900s, where they read that, and the promise in their minds was a lot different than it is today. He said, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to beat you into next week. So, yeah, your late days could be shortened back then. But how have attitudes toward parents changed in the last 6 decades, 7 decades? Huh? That's a good word. Respect. What's some thoughts about what brought that on? This lack of respect, parents, authority. Where did that come from?
I think it's,
What?
when parents are around, they're both working, and they get away with a lot.
They do.
Working in the school, I mean, the respect level for, because I was lunch lady, I was a teacher, so they're not gonna respect me as well, but I made them,
Wouldn't feed them.
you know.
Without a cause, or it's, or a clue, whatever. They show these teenagers rebelling against their parents. They,
Yeah, you've got to think that television has done an awful lot.
Well, and parents don't honor each other anymore. I mean, divorce used to be something unusual, and now it's normal,
Yeah.
which is destroys family. It's no longer a family, so how do you honor that?
And think about how media has such a compelling and convincing power in our society. They began to have, when we remember television, you don't. You were so young, you're just a child. But for some of us, we remember in the 50s, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, and in those things, the parents were respected. But slowly, even with Father Knows Best, Hollywood started this change where the husband and the dad was a doofus. And it was subtle at first. Oh, he's just a knucklehead. He can't think. He's always doing something wrong. He's the one that gets in trouble. He's the one that we blame. And it got so prevalent by the 80s that Married with Children, that guy was an idiot. And what was the cartoon? The Simpsons. They just, it was deplorable. Not to be outdone, society then moved because they wanted so bad for this to happen. They started pushing the homosexual agenda. Today, when you watch television, you would think by what you see on TV that everybody's a homosexual. To find a family, what's called the nuclear family, mom, dad, and kids, they're not there. And so what that does to people is it shifts their perception. Well, this can't be bad because everybody is. The 60s, Was there anything in the 60s that young people weren't anti? They were against the establishment, they were against the man, they were against the war, they were against the soldiers, they were against the police. They weren't anti-drugs, and they weren't anti-sex. Yeah, those two things they were for. But it was just under attack. And way back, 5,000 years ago, God said, you need to honor your parents. And yeah.
Of course, you know, I'm not a parent, but I hang out with kids, is the discipline that parents should be doing, they don't, so there's no consequences. I'm talking, and I'm sure this lady's got her little kids under control.
Oh, yeah.
Because she teaches them the word no. And so when you teach a child their boundaries, when they grow older, they don't know what boundaries are. So people can come at them, they won't know to say no or leave me alone or gee, it must be okay. So I think it goes back to the parents also of they need to do discipline.
Yeah, and of course we have trouble with discipline for two reasons. One, we're afraid of the consequences, and and it's so much work. Man, it is so much work to discipline your kids, isn't it? Yeah. And so we always take the easy road. I only had my boys, I lost them in 86. Kevin was 4, Brad was 6. And from that point on, I only had them every other weekend. And that was tough because they lived in a home environment where the word no was never spoken. And I was such a horrible parent and so out of control and so mad at the world that the word no was number one in my vocabulary. And I'll never forget, I decided to take them north. I thought this would be great. We went up to Gaylord, and there was a cottage up there that someone from the church in Bowling Green let me stay, and we were having a pretty good time. And on the way home, we stopped at a putt-putt golf place. And I thought, oh, this would just be so fun. My oldest, Brad, really keyed in on his dad, and because I was so angry about everything, he was too. And we were putting, and I'll never forget, he missed the putt. His little brother gooned him about it, and he threw his club, and it helicoptered over 10, 20 people. And I'm thinking lawsuit, and I grabbed him and hauled him out to the car, and as I was spanking him, a bystander come by and said, "Stop it. You touch that boy again, and I'm calling the police." I said, "Ma'am, this is my child." She says, "I don't care. You are abusing that child." And I said, "Well, then look away, because the abuse is going to continue." And she did. She got a phone, called the police. Wow. That was in 1986. Think about today. Teachers are terrified to discipline kids in school because legalities. And so it all comes together. But God is trying to show us that honoring our children by disciplining them, and then our children honoring their parents by respecting them, man, it's just a better way to live. Okay.
I think of going to the 70s, watching my parents work 70 hours a week, and then they're economically they're thinking they need a second income to put the kids through college. Then, I think the point you're making, they're not available. And then I think that breaks the whole cycle up, because you have that responsibility
Yeah.
to show the example, to be available, to be there when they come home from school, rather than farming them out
Mm-hmm.
to the poor teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we find it difficult to believe, because we just find it difficult to believe, is our children don't value the things we provide for them as much as they value the time we give them. And when I sit with families and they start talking about their parents who are now deceased, I'm about ready to do a funeral, it's amazing how many times those adult children decried the fact that their dad was always working, or their mom was doing 2 and 3 jobs, because they said, we wish we would have had time with them. We didn't need all the things. We didn't need the boats and the cottages and all of that. We would have preferred to have them. But when we're in that struggle, we continually think, I'm not home, so I'm going to buy them things, and that will satisfy them. And it doesn't. It's a struggle. So I'm getting depressed. So let's move on. Number 6. Renee, you're up. Verse 13.
You shall not murder.
Wow. Now that's what we have today. King James said, don't kill. What's the difference between kill and murder? Yeah, we got one. We had a lawyer there.
Yeah, but he's in the booth.
Oh, he's there. He's not talking to us. But Amy's a lawyer. She can talk to us. What's the difference between kill and murder?
Well, frankly, I can't think of anything specifically other than killing. I don't know, murder to me would involve more of an intentional thing.
Yeah.
It just, it has a different word when I just say kill.
Planning.
Charlie?
I say murder would be premeditated, and killing someone could be a spare of the moment, or killing could be like an accident that occurred, like maybe you slid on ice and killed someone unintentionally. I guess that would be a different degree of the word murder.
Yeah.
Well, you kill a thing or you murder a person. You're tries to kill it. You don't say I murdered my chicken.
You might.
Some people might. But they don't go to the
I ate them with consent.
Well, and isn't the King James translation a lot more literal? So they could have just been like sticking word to word, like not word to word, because later on, when they're talking about like the word, like going through all of the 1 million laws that they have to do, then he starts talking about things that you do if you do kill someone. So he could have just originally been like, hey, don't kill someone.
You've been reading, haven't you?
And, just as a guideline. And then he's like, oh, okay. So now we got to talk about guidelines here, people.
And also that this verse has been used thou shalt not kill for people who are anti-government, anti-war. We shouldn't be in war because God says don't kill. And then they have a trouble, so they just skip over the passages where God has Israel go in and kill all those people. But that wasn't murder, because that was a command of God, who was doing the same thing that a surgeon does when he finds cancer and he goes in and he cuts it out to save the patient. God was cutting out those people to save a nation. And but they get that word. Well, I can't go to war because I'm not supposed to kill. But you're not supposed to murder. And so we have these language. Oh.
Intended the word was within the context of this time. That's probably better, because we pull in our ideas because it's based on our legal system.
Yeah. And the word signifies malicious and unlawful killing. Chuck?
I think it's interesting as he says that we also recognize that God made provisions for the Israelites to have some cities where somebody who killed a person by accident could go and still be safe. There is a distinction in the Israelites.
Yeah, because judicial killing and killing in war will be later mentioned, and God condones both. In fact, judicial killing, if you do this, stone you. And the death penalty was there. God endorsed the death penalty. And some people have trouble with that. But then they don't have any problem with thou shalt not murder when it comes to abortion. Then all of a sudden, well, that's not what he meant. Well, they say that's not murder because that's not a person. And yeah, we got some moms here that would disagree with that. How does this command give us an understanding about suicide?
Suicide is murder. Whether you're killing someone else or killing yourself, you're still killing a human.
Yeah.
Unlawfully.
Intentionally.
And then I like this part. So if society decides that once you turn 60, you should be eradicated, as a gift to society, I said, don't murder. Because it applies to me. I don't think anybody should kill me just because I'm, almost 70. That's not nice. But there are people that say, yeah, we got to put them out of their misery. We shoot horses. Culling, yes. Yeah, don't let them do that to me, Robin.
Run when the age was 30, and they had like a little flashing Dodge.
Oh, yes.
And they were trying to escape the dome to get out to what was, society before they went into the dome.
Yeah. That wasn't the same as Blade Runner, though, was it?
No, it was called Logan's Run.
Logan's Run. All right. Now we beat that to death, so let's go on. Number 7, verse 14. Renee, that was so short last time. Read verse 14.
You shall not commit adultery.
Oh, wow. Um, by and large, when you listen to people, I don't know if anyone ever plans to commit adultery. Because normally they say, you know, it just happened. We started out as co-workers, and we started out as friends, and we were spending all this time together, and I didn't mean to, it just happened. You ever heard that? So, even if you have that as an excuse, you need to somehow, sometime, some way, think, stop. If this is where it's going, stop. Because nobody makes you commit adultery. It might not be intentional, but you can intentionally stop. And that's that's what we need to do. That's pretty clear. Okay?
Can I add?
You add it, Charlie.
In my mind's eye, you could never step out the relationship with your significant other, your wife, and still be committing adultery. If you're intimate with your wife and you're thinking about that coworker, that's the same as doing it right there. I mean, I don't know if everyone thinks like that, but it goes back to what Jesus teaches. You know, it's like if you have murder in your heart, you've done it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of adulterers out there, whether they realize they're adulterers or not, just by having that thought or in their heart of wanting to commit that, even though they hadn't actually stepped into that role.
Excellent. Excellent. And that goes for all of these. I mean, Jesus really
100%.
takes it up a notch.
It's more than just the physical realm. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Even coming to this next one, Renee, read verse 15.
I lost it.
You shall not steal.
Shoplifting is such a monumental crime today that Walmarts are closing. They cannot withstand the losses from people walking out with things. Good girl. Did you, I didn't. I guess it's that feeling that if I ever tried that, I'd be, the alarms would go off, but they had a thing here a couple weeks ago about a congresswoman who, right on camera, was caught skipping the self-checkout, and I thought all that stuff was supposed to have the alarm set off, but apparently she would do one thing, and then she'd put two of them in the cart, and she'd do one thing, and she'd put two of them in the cart, and she just walked out. And they didn't catch her until they went through the tapes at the end of the day. And they said, whoa. Yeah.
There's no punishment for it.
Slap on the wrist.
Public shame.
They look right at you and go, do what? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, they used to be sneaky. Nowadays, they come in with a whole gang, and they break everything, what they call that.
Smash and grab.
Vandalism.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They're just brazen about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to the radio.
Yeah, they had a news thing about those were, I forget what the store was, but there were 3 women that were thin, but they were wearing these garments that made them look heavy. And their garments that they were wearing were filled with pockets. And so they looked large when they went into the store, and they looked the same when they came out. But they were just loaded down with merchandise stuffed in their pockets. And you think about people who come up with that stuff. They're so ingenious. Why don't they use that ingenuity to benefit society? You know, Charlie?
I see that. I understand the physical theft of stealing merchandise. But my heart speaks to me and it says, are we not stealing God's blessings for our life by non-repentance? Just a thought.
Yeah. Or are you stealing by not giving back to Him a tithe of what He's given you?
Giving a money tithe is an easy way to tithe. As you were stating last week in reference to there's many ways to tithe. You threw it out there. You can offer your time. You can have a skill set. A lot of us don't think in that mindset. They're like, oh, we're going to give this here. We're going to give what we think we can hold back here. It's just such a common thing. But I think tithing to the Lord goes beyond the money part,
right?
And goes into tithing oneself to carrying out His will in your life by just following His direction and listening to His command, and then in a moment planting a seed or listening. Hey, turn around and go pull that person out of the ditch. And then the opportunity to tithe, you're tithing into that person. So there's other types of tithing.
Nice. Do you want to conclude my sermon on Sunday with that testimony?
People go con you out of money.
Oh yeah, phone scams. Yeah, and the older we get, the more susceptible we are to that.
And super young people too.
What?
Super duper young people.
Yeah.
They just don't know.
We have to, we're constantly talking to Bruce about that because he's so gullible. And when people meet him at school or whatever, they are always trying to talk him out of what he has and promising him the moon. And he comes home and his dad says, how come you're not wearing your boots? Well, there was a kid that said he didn't have any. And I had boots and shoes. So I let him take them. Yeah, he's lost clothing, he's lost coats, he's lost boots. The kid can't keep track of anything. Because someone says, I want that, and he's just like remember the sermon I told you about, Jeannie? You come into my house and you say, he's got his grandma's jeans. Man, I like that coat. Don't do it, Bruce. But Grandma says we should share. No, sharing's good, but people are not supposed to steal. And then what, you still have it, Renee?
I do now, yeah.
Okay, verse 16.
You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor.
What do you think that means?
Lying in official capacity.
It means lying.
Assumptions without proof against the neighbor, that happens a lot. Where you can have a grudge or an assumption just based upon what you perceive as being true without actually knowing if it's factual or not, but yet run them as if it was.
Yeah. So we have at least 3 different categories. We have people that are flat out liars. We have people that make wrong assumptions about people based on who knows what. And then what we have today is accusations that don't need proof. You can accuse anybody of anything and you don't have to prove it. You just call up the police and say, this person did that. Or you go to your school and you say, this person did that. And that's right. You're guilty until proven innocent. And there was a day when, wasn't it the other way?
It used to be, that was before.
Yeah. We were innocent until proven guilty, but not anymore. You know, the accusation doesn't even have to make sense. Yeah, so God says, this isn't good. Don't do that. And then, of course, the last one is all about being content with what you've got instead of looking at somebody else and thinking, I want what they have. Because it doesn't matter. You got to be satisfied with what you've got. That's contentment is so lacking because we've got this hole that can't be filled, and we think that things will fill it. And the reason that we're not content for so many people is they don't have God in their life. When you got God in your life, I mean strong, you're content because He is enough. Right? Charlie, right?
To touch on that, one of my favorite sayings is because it's factual, I've eaten out of dumpsters and I've dined with kings, like people that've had a lot of money. So I know both spectrums of that pendulum, and I know the in-between. And so from living in hotels to the very nice house that I've earned to this point, I have a broad spectrum. And it kind of gives me the ability, or it does give me the discernment, the ability to recognize and love all people in all walks and all areas in their life, because I see myself in everybody.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Let's go down to chapter 21. And we haven't got to the million rules yet, but we're getting closer. So, are you ready to read?
Me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Read chapter 21, first 6 verses.
These are the ordinances that you are to set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he is to serve for 6 years. Then in the 7th, he is to leave as a free man, without paying anything. If he arrives alone, he is to leave alone. If he arrives with a wife, his wife is to leave with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children belong to her master, and the man must leave alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I do not want to leave as a free man, his master is to bring him to the judges and then bring him to the door or doorpost. His master will pierce his ear with an awl, and he will serve his master for life.
Slavery was widespread in the ancient world. I mean, it was everywhere. Every civilization had them. But no Hebrew slave could be compelled to serve more than 6 years in Israel. God wasn't saying, I'm going to abolish slavery because everybody had slaves. But he said, no Hebrew slave. Now, how would a Hebrew become a slave of another Hebrew?
They were sold. They were sold.
They were sold by their parents. They got in debt.
Debt or servitude. Yep.
And you got a kid. You can't pay, so you sell the kid. And that's why children were so respectful of their parents. Because if they were really, really nice, the parents said, no, let's sell the other one. Sold the daughter? Well, it wasn't selling them. Maybe the daughters thought that, but no. The other reason that you could sell yourself to get out of debt. But in both cases, 6 years. So they could leave the 7th year or the sabbatical year. So let's say that if it happened, and time's gone on, and by the time your generation comes around, you're in the 46th year since the last sabbatical, because every 50th year was a Sabbath. So you were living in year 46, and you sold yourself or your child. 4 more years was all you'd have to be a slave, not 6. Or if it was the 47th year or the 48th year, because every 50th year, everybody was freed, and they started over at 0. Not only did they have to get rid of all of their slaves, but they couldn't plant. No planting, no seed sowing. That 50th year, the ground had a rest. And boy, that just used to drive the Hebrews nuts. And they come up with all kinds of loopholes because they just couldn't stand not making a thing. Now, the Bill of Rights for women slaves guaranteed to them legal status as a permanent member of the family they were sold to. So if you were indentured, given to a man's son, then you became a daughter with all of the rights, all the inheritance that went with that. And if the guy, after he was married to you, didn't like you, and marry somebody else, your father-in-law still had to treat you like a daughter. Didn't send you away, didn't take anything away from you. You were still his daughter. Even if your cotton-picking son, was a jerk and left you, you still were there. Basic rights. And one of the basic rights was a cohabitation. And I don't have any idea how that worked in reality. Theoretically, what that meant was you had got a daughter, and she is entitled to food, clothing, and sex. That was God's law. I don't know how that worked. It doesn't make, I read this stuff and I'm thinking, well, what in the world? So let's go down to verses, start in verse 12. Robin, you're up 12 through 14.
He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hands, then I will appoint you a place which he may plead. If, however, a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar so that he may die.
So here we are to this thou shalt not kill thing. Instances of accidental death. You didn't mean to kill him, you just did. you could flee to a city and stay there forever. But you didn't have to die. Now read verses 15 through 17.
He who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. He who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. There'd be a lot of people being put to death this day and age for that last one.
So, here is where the don't murder comes in. A judicial execution. You hit your parents and put to death. There's more where the respect comes in. If you kidnap somebody and he sells him, somebody kidnaps me, I don't know why they would, but they kidnap me, and then they either sell me or the family finds me in this guy's possession, the kidnapper's put to death. They didn't have to have jails. You were either let go or you died. You know, it was a different way to live. And then, if you curse your father or your mother, so it's not just striking them, if you say naughty things to them, so, Becky, 18 and 19.
If men quarrel and one hits the other with a stone or puts his fist and he does not die, but is confined to death, the one who struck the blow will not be held responsible if the other gets up and walks around outside with his staff. However, he must pay the injured man for the loss of his time and see that he is completely healed.
So you've got this situation where you get into a quarrel, and you hit him and incapacitate him. If he lives, then you have to reimburse him for the time that he was off from work. So you got to pay his wages. If he dies, then you're going to be punished. Yeah, and the restitution, I had another set of notes that will make this better, but I don't have them with me, so there goes that. But this way you get done faster. Look at verses 20 and 21. Joe?
Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished. If the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished. The slave recovers after a day or two, and since the slave is their property.
Yeah. So if you have a slave and you beat them and they die, then you're going to get punished. But if you have a slave and you beat them and they survive, no harm, no foul, because it's your property. See, this is where that other page of notes I had was so much better about this. Let me see if I've got this here.
What was the question? if, that applies to the women who were married into the family because they were, sold first, so they're technically, they're slaves, they were just, married in.
Yeah, here we are. If she was sold to a guy's son, if he beat her, then the father-in-law, who has to treat her as his daughter, he steps in and punishes the son. But if he doesn't step in and do that, then she can return to her parents and be free. In this 18 through 32 here about injuries, if you kill somebody, you have to pay for his life. But if he convalesces, is able to walk, then you've got to just reimburse the victim for lost time from work. In the slaves in verses 20 and 21, God didn't want slaves to be looked at like pieces of property, but as humans. So if in disciplining a slave, the master went too far and killed him, then the master was punished. And we're not told what the master's punishment was, but masters really hated to kill their slaves because it was their slaves. You don't want to destroy your, it's about as dumb as your dishwasher's not working, so you take a sledgehammer and just destroy it. Dumb. Try to find somebody that can fix it. Same way with the slave, you want to fix it. You don't want to destroy it. And then a pregnant woman, if she was married to one of the combatants, you got two guys fighting, and one of the guys that's fighting is your husband. And she has a miscarriage. Then the guy that hit her is killed.
Difficult when we read this. We're always putting it in the context of societies that have judges and laws and an organized system. The moment they're being given this, these are slaves out of Egypt. Now, I'm not quite sure the conditions in Egypt, because I've spent some time studying that, but totally controlled. Very little knowledge of God, because they've been slaves for hundreds of years.
Right.
He takes them out of here, and it's almost like this is the building blocks of a group of people that don't have any building blocks as a society.
Yeah.
And it feels to us very over the top, and yet we got nothing. You almost have to start with, we were almost alluding to it earlier, very black and white beginnings.
And this is where the headaches for Moses began, because he had to relay all of this. And so they just came to him. He hadn't any time yet. And Jethro said, man, Moses, you've got to figure this out, because you got a line up here. And they, some of them are dead, they're getting punched, they're getting ripped off, they're being kidnapped. You got to figure this out. You got to train some other people and get the basics down, because you're right, they had absolutely no concept, because they had no rights in Egypt. They couldn't think of anything.
The sin that caused them to squander around the wilderness for 40 years was that it's not good. But I wonder from God's point of view is they needed 40 years to become a boot.
They needed longer than 40 years. Yeah. Okay, we're done.